It's always a thrill to have this gentleman on our show. It's Mr. Bill O'Reilly. You know him at BillO'Reilly.com with a new book, Confronting the Presidents. No-spin assessments of the leaders who made the U.S. what it is today, from Washington to Biden. Bill O'Reilly here on the Scott Sand Show. Bill, it's great to have you back on.
Thanks for having me in. Scott, how are you?
I'm terrific. I obviously want to talk about the book, but I'd love to start out and get this out of the way and get your thoughts on a second attempt on Donald Trump's life in its many months.
Well, we live in a violent country. It's always been that way. Even before we were America, the level of violence in the United States was always there for a variety of reasons. Not a character flaw so much as history unfolding and conflict and freedom colliding. So in my new book, I have chronicled all the assassinations before the Trump attempts, or 7 of them. And 4 were successful in killing presidents: Garfield, McKinley, Lincoln, and JFK. It was all one thing in common: mentally ill people doing this. Ronald Reagan survived, but just barely. And I believe these 2 guys that tried to take Trump out are mentally ill as well. And in a land where freedom is allowed and encouraged, it is very difficult to control millions of mentally ill people, and that's what we have. So I don't blame any one person. I think the Secret Service has to be reorganized. The woman who ran it, who resigned after her devastating testimony in front of Congress, that was a political appointee by Joe Biden. She didn't know what she was doing. But certainly the service needs to recalibrate how it protects not only Trump, but all of the high-profile candidates and President Biden. So that's where we are. We live in an unprecedented age of hatred. Only the Civil War tops it. And it doesn't seem like things are getting better.
So in your book, in Confronting the Presidents, you actually look at Donald Trump and you break him down into kind of a character exploration of 2 different people.
Yeah, I mean, he ran the country very efficiently, in my opinion. And I think I could out-debate anybody who would come in and say that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were more effective in their term than Trump was in his. I mean, the facts just don't stack up that way. So why isn't Trump ahead by 10 points? It's because of his demeanor. And now he's got a chance to course correct because everybody's focused on him again. And I hope with some sympathy. I know that's not across the board, but decent people should feel bad for the president and his family going through all of this. And I would like to see him basically say, all right, I'm going to tamp down the personal stuff and I'm going to tamp up the policy stuff. Because as I said, he was successful by and large in policy in his 4 years.
I believe it was George Bush. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm sure you'll know that you could tell a lot about the measure of a man by the people with whom he surrounded himself. Now Donald Trump seems to be surrounding himself by people with people like Laura Loomer that seem to be dragging him further and further right, making his outrageous statements even more exaggerated.
Inexplicable. Why a candidate for president would do that? Any candidate. You have a situation where Donald Trump only answers to one person, Donald Trump. His advisors have no control over him. He does what he wants to do, and somehow he finds Ms. Loomer's company worthy. Now, in a private, that would be fine. I'm not insinuating anything, but to have her on a campaign jet doesn't do him any good at all. It hurts him. And it gives the opposition ammo all day long.
We're talking to Bill O'Reilly, BillO'Reilly.com, the new book, Confronting the Presidents. You mentioned the unrest that we are experiencing now, the greatest since perhaps the Civil War. As you look back to the Civil War and confronting the presidents, who were the men that led this country that were able to bring this country together, in your opinion?
Well, it took a while after the Civil War to do that. So the Civil War ended, obviously, in a Union victory, and that was because largely of Abraham Lincoln and U.S. Grant. But running up to the war, James Buchanan was president. 1856 to 60, the worst president by far in the nation's history, because Buchanan was a coward. He simply wouldn't face down the growing rebellion. He didn't do anything. He even wouldn't send reinforcements to Fort Sumter when asked. I mean, the guy was just a disaster. And it took decades for the United States to get over that. And it even bled into the 20th century with the Jim Crow laws and things like that. So we have always been a divided country, but with the access now to social media, that's really the tipping point. So there's so much hatred and defamation on social media, and everybody uses it, that it has just accelerated the hatred. And mentally ill people are subject to that. And the fuse gets lighted a lot quicker than it used to. So that's where we are.
You're certainly critical in confronting the presidents of Buchanan, but what about Harding? Of those two, who would you say was worse for the country?
Buchanan far and away. Harding was the Harding campaign is exactly like the Harris campaign. I'm not making any comparison between Kamala Harris and Warren Harding. Warren Harding was a corrupt man, but he didn't campaign. He never gave an interview. And Americans voted for him because they were fed up with Woodrow Wilson and Democrats for 8 years. That was World War I. And so they would have voted for chimpanzee, and Warren was the chimp. And Warren got in there and did absolutely nothing but stay up all night playing cards with his corrupt cronies, getting drunk and chasing his mistress around the White House. I mean, it was
that sounds
appalling.
like a good life. I mean, except for the fact that he was president, but it sounds like a good life.
That's what a couple of people said. But Harding was a signal to Americans who would vote for somebody like Kamala Harris, knowing nothing about her, nothing about what she might want to do. She obviously has no concrete solutions to any vexing problems, but I'm still going to vote for her because I hate Donald Trump. I mean, you're voting for somebody who's going to hurt you, and I'm 100% sure of that. It's an opinion, but it's an opinion based on facts. And so I'm trying to spread the word. Look, I understand why you might not like Donald Trump. Certainly a lot of his rhetoric is irresponsible. For the guy to come out, former president, say, I hate Taylor Swift, that's ridiculous. And it hurts Trump.
Right.
It hurts him.
And ridiculous statements about eating the dogs and cats and geese in Springfield, Ohio, which has been – now, it does point out that there has been a problem with immigration and with Biden-Harris immigration policies, but cats and dogs aren't being eaten in Springfield.
And why say that? So all you got to do is say there's been more than 20,000 migrants pouring into Springfield, population of about 50,000. It's overrun the town. Town can't handle it. And Joe Biden, Kamala Harris are the reasons why that has happened. Does that make more sense than somebody's eating a Cocker Spaniel? I mean, come on.
I think so.
To me, I'm just sitting here going, I don't know what the deuce is going on, because I know Trump as well as anybody knows him. 35 years, I wrote a book on him, The United States of Trump. I don't know why he's doing this stuff.
Other than to get attention. I mean, he is a master at attracting headlines, but I think it hurts him at the end.
You couldn't possibly get more attention. He gets more attention than any human being on earth. All right? The only person who might get more attention is Jesus. Okay, so why do you have to do this? You don't have to do it. Stay on policy and you'll win. Keep doing this and you'll lose.
Bill, you talked about the corruption of the Harding administration. When you think of corrupt U.S. presidents, you think of Richard Nixon. And corruption, I think, surrounded an administration that was otherwise pretty effective, especially with regards to foreign policy.
With Nixon, it was a character flaw, but he wasn't nearly as corrupt as his predecessor, Lyndon Johnson. Now, there was a man corrupt through and through. From the very beginning of his political career to the end of it, this guy was dishonest. He did horrible things, and the press covered for him because of the Great Society programs. And when I exposed him in Confronting the Presidents as one of the most corrupt presidents ever, I actually took delight in doing it, because on every page of my book, you'll learn stuff you don't know. Nobody knows the relationship between LBJ and Edgar Hoover. I mean, these guys set up a brothel to entrap people, politicians. Do you know that?
No.
I mean, it was outrageous what they did. Right. And the press covered, just like they covered for JFK and almost every liberal president in history. Nixon, no excuses, broke the law, but a character flaw. rather than endemic corruption of LBJ is a difference.
We're talking to Bill O'Reilly, BillO'Reilly.com. The book is Confronting the Presidents, No-Spin Assessments of the Leaders Who Made the U.S. What It Is Today, from Washington to Biden. And everybody's got their own list of who their favorite or who they think the best president was. And you could throw names out from Washington to Jefferson, JFK, Reagan, obviously. What president or presidents do you think had the most positive impact on the U.S.?
Well, Abraham Lincoln, of course, had overcome the most problematic situation in history, and he did it. He was a kind man also. And he endured tremendous suffering. He lost his son. His wife was a nut. Boy, oh boy. I mean, so Lincoln's far out in front. George Washington would be second, forged the nation, wasn't venal, tough guy. Could have taken advantage of a situation and didn't. FDR you have to put up there because he had to handle the Depression and World War II. Teddy Roosevelt lifted the morale of the nation and was a very effective president, in my opinion. James Polk, nobody knows him, but we wouldn't have in America today the way it is without Polk. And so I don't rank them. I let the reader do that. But I tell you strengths and weaknesses, what they did, and you can evaluate whether they helped or hurt the nation. And we're very blunt in this stuff. Is when I say no spin assessments, I mean no spin assessments.
On the spectrum, where do you put Donald Trump and Joe Biden? Because depending on your political lean, you could say that either one was the greatest president we've had. And I think that's hyperbole for either side. I mean, I don't think Donald Trump was a better president than Reagan or Washington or Lincoln. But he certainly did some good things. And Joe Biden, whether you disagree with him or not, has certainly served this country for 50 years.
Well, anybody says that either Trump or Biden's one of the greatest presidents, you give them a lollipop and pat them on the head. Trump is a good president, in my opinion. His decisions helped the working people. Real wages are up more than 7%. That's the barometer. Biden's the second worst president in American history because he created problems. So people like Hoover and Franklin Pierce and even to some extent Buchanan, although Buchanan was way out in front as the worst, Biden created the open border, not Congress. Nobody did it but him, executive order. He created inflation from 1.4 to 9% by his attack on the fossil fuel industries and having the Treasury print an amazing amount of money that he had to know was going to lead to tremendous devaluation of the dollar, which is why prices went up. So this guy, he created these problems in concert with Kamala Harris. And I have Biden ranked, I don't rank it in the book, but I do say in my essay on Biden that he's the second worst president in history.
Bill O'Reilly, BillO'Reilly.com, Confronting the Presidents. It's available now. Bill, where do you see us heading? And hopefully you and I will talk before the election or right afterward. How important is this election, and where do you see this country going for the next 4 years, depending on who wins?
Well, if the progressive left takes over, and that's Kamala Harris. See, Biden doesn't have any principles. He didn't believe in anything but going to the beach. And he was befuddled from the very beginning. He did what his progressive masters told him to do. And that's why we're in so much trouble, and society has turned into a woke DEI situation. Kamala Harris is a true believer. So all you got to do is look at California and the mess that state is in, the largest state in the union. That's what Kamala Harris wants to impose on the American people. Enormous taxation, unregulated immigration, no supervision of crime. I mean, it's just horrifying what this woman believes in. And most Americans have no clue. They're just caught up in the personalities, and that's dangerous.
I agree. At Bill O'Reilly and at No Spin News on X, formerly Twitter, BillO'Reilly.com, and buy the new book, Confronting the Presidents, No Spin Assessments of the Leaders Who Made the U.S. What It Is Today, from Washington to Biden. Bill O'Reilly, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for your time, sir.
Appreciate it, Scott. We'll talk again soon, I hope.